Hello everybody, this is going to be day 2, probably video 3. We'll find out. I'm probably going to have 15 videos before I actually upload a single one. Currently don't have a laptop to get any of this GoPro footage edited and put on YouTube, but we're going to work on that. For video 2, it's going to be some snapshots and chunks of some of the install portion, and hopefully by the end of the night we'll have the engine hanging in the engine bay. This is a K-swap into an 88 CRX HF. Go through some of the motor mount setups right now with you. First off, let's start with the post mount and the differences that we have. So the mount on the right, this is the original K24 post mount. Multiple differences. The bolt hole spacing obviously is the same between the two of these because this is the one we're going to use. This is from a 02 to 06 Honda CRV with a K24 as well. The post mount setup, this hardware is of different lengths obviously versus the stud and this bolt. There are a couple of bolt length differences as well. It's mainly this bolt here, this position closest to the motor mount bolts. These two bolts and these two bolts are 74 mil in length. This one's 84 mil in length. This one's 94 mil in length. So in addition to needing to pick up the CRV post mount, you'll also need to pick up an 84 mil bolt to use in this location. This one is too long to reuse in your CRV mount on your K24A2. I would assume, and I haven't had my hands on one yet, that the K20A2 post mount block looks similar to this. Either way, make sure you get the right length of hardware and the stud and bolt combination in the right length to use this post mount on your K20 and K24 motors that didn't come out of either a CRV or an Element. Both the CRV and the Element have this mount on them. Again, that's 02 to 06 for the CRV, and it's going to be 03 to, I believe, 06 or 07 for the Element. Alright, now we're looking at the rear of the engine, rear of the transmission. The motor mount that is used for this from Hasport is the EF-K5 and the EF-K all-wheel drive rear mount. This mounts to 4 locations, 2 on the engine, 2 on the transmission. There's a through bolt goes through the engine into the transmission. That's one of the mounting locations. This threaded hole on the back of the block is the second engine mount location. This threaded hole on the transmission is the third overall mount, first one on the transmission. And then this bolt location on the engine, but on the tranny side, is the fourth mounting location. You can't use this mount with your EP3, RSX, or RSX Type S transmission because that transmission utilizes this bolt hole location, and the bell housing then obviously bolts to the engine through that, not allowing you to use that bolt with this bracket. That's why they've got the different mount for that. Your Honda Accord, Acura TSX, your Element and CRV transmissions, plus this is a 2012 Civic Si, the 12 through 15 Civic Si, and the 13 through 16 Acura ILX, you would use this mount from Hasport with. So everybody, here is that rear mount installed. These are the 4 mounting hole locations. And then this area with the dual height is going to go to a dog bone mount and to the rear crossmember. And I'll show you that as I get this thing hung in place. Our next Hasport mount to deal with is our transmission side mount. We're going to remove the hardware, including these studs, from these locations plus this bolt over here. We'll remove this mount in its entirety, and I'll show you the bracket that we're going to go to replace that with. That's this guy here. Most of you guys know this already, but to get this stud out, which we've already removed this one, put one of the nuts on upside down if it's flanged like this. Throw the other one on, hold the bottom, zip it down tight. I like to try and break it loose with the bottom one, because at that point you're not trying to loosen it from the bottom with the top bolt. Get it started, zip it off, your studs out, and then if you need the stud for reuse, separate them again. Well, you'll need both of these out, mainly because this small shouldered area, that will interfere with the hole in that Hasport bracket, and I'll show you that in just a second. So here is the Hasport transmission side mount, not fully installed, but I wanted to show you why you need to change those studs. The shouldered portion of the stud is actually larger than the holes in the bracket, so even when that stud is run all the way down where it would be in its stock location to the top surface of the transmission, this bracket will not sit flush with the transmission, which is what it needs to do. So make sure you use the proper Hasport fasteners. So this is the Hasport EF K2, but I think it's actually the same in almost all transmissions, again, except for the Honda Accord and the Acura TSX. But this one is going into an EF, so this is the EF K2 transmission side bracket installed after those studs were removed and using Hasport's hardware. This is for the K-Series engine side mount, passenger side mount in the CRX, the EF. We're going to utilize this bolt hole and this bolt hole to align the bracket with this hole and this hole. And at that point we'll mock things up, hang the engine, and verify our placement is good. Mark the area around the bracket so we can clean the paint away in preparation to weld it in place. So here's the rear cross member, a little better lighting. On the rear cross member, factory D series, these three holes are used for the factory rear mount. This one is already threaded but not used, so ran a tap through that. You're probably going to need to do the same thing. So this is the Hasport rear cross member bracket. Bolts into 4 already threaded holes in the cross member. This one will more than likely need to be thread chased to get the hardware to go in. And I went with the EFK all-wheel drive setup. So that includes this additional bracket that gets basically sandwiched on this end before it gets bolted down. This bracket will get welded to the cross member once everything gets mocked up in the car, and that'll give additional reinforcement on this end of the bracket. This end of the bracket obviously is more than strong enough with the 4 pieces of hardware holding it in place. I'm going to get this thrown on the cross member and show you what it looks like in place. Here is the Hasport rear mount, rear bracket, bolted to the rear cross member. This is the dog bone portion that I was referring to earlier. This is what will engage with the rear transmission / engine bracket that's already bolted to the swap. So we've got the 3 mounts tentatively installed in the engine compartment. This is the transmission side mount utilizing the factory engine side chassis mount. This is the rear engine / transmission mount or torque mount installed on the rear cross member. This is the new engine side mount on the passenger side of the chassis. It is bolted in 2 locations here just to hold it in place. This is for mock-up. I'm probably going to have to bend this out of the way to get clearance for the engine. But again, just mocking things up before we mark around the outside and clean the paint off so that we can do the final welding on that, and then that'll be installed. Alright, so I did need to move, like all the videos that I've already seen, the brake proportioning valve off the shock tower, moving it towards the firewall. I did flip the bracket. These are safety torques. You can see them from the bottom side. So you need Torx bit. It's a T30 security Torx, so it's got the hole in the center. Let's see if I can get that better. A little better view of that. So I've got the bracket flipped over, and I will later on be installing some riv nuts into the firewall to attach it. But now I believe we've got clearance for the drivetrain to get hung in place. So thank you to my neighbor Benjamin for bringing over Arepas and some cerveza. I've got everything tucked away. Should be ready to slide the drivetrain under on the cart and see what we can do on positioning. Thank you, Benjamin. So it should clear. This is not our first attempt. Our first attempt, the factory exhaust manifold was too much to fit as we were dropping it in place, so we had to go back up and remove that exhaust. Now I believe we're good. We're real tight up here on the alternator, but it's gonna clear. Go down. Alright, stop it for a second. You take it off. Alright, I screw this up. Let's go the other side. I'll take that one upwards. Alright, keep going down. Alright, hang on. Alright. Keep dropping. Alright, stop. So, the 2008 alternator Acura TSX will not fit into the CRX. Alright, second attempt. So far we've removed the factory exhaust manifold. That's fine. And we removed the alternator. Looks like we should have clearance all the way down to the mounts. And things are looking pretty good. Just a little more. Stop there. Yep, that'll work. We'll have to lift this. Well, it's in there. I just left the alternator off. Again, we're just going for initial install, mocking things up, making sure that this weld-in bracket is in its correct location so that we can then clean up the paint and weld it in place. It fit pretty much perfect. I had to add a couple of boards to my cart on this side, probably about 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches. On the transmission side it was a little low as far as meeting with its motor mount versus the engine side. At this point we'll move some stuff out of the way and lift it up, and we'll go ahead and put that rear torque mount in. We got the torque mount in my car, in my chassis at least. It is lining up really good. Looks good back here. That's all 3 of the mounts installed with no issues. We can go ahead and mark around this bracket now, clean up some metal, and get that welded.